Okay, let's start. Hi, everyone. My name is Tu David Phu. I'm a first generation Vietnamese American chef. If you watch Top Chef, I was on Top Chef season 15. Um, Also, I'm an Oakland native, and what I cook is what I call and what I start to understand now is Vietnamese diaspora cuisine, meaning that I was born other than the place of origin of my family, specifically here in California, and kind of intermingling the two. I cooked with, and my mom cooked with the sort of cuisine and palate that she had from back home, with some sort of, with a little bit of improvisation with the ingredients they have here. It's not fusion per se. I don't think fusion is encumbersome of all these intricate details of being a refugee and being an immigrant and being addition to that being in Oakland. So that's why I call it Vietnamese diaspora. Okay. And today we're doing Vietnamese wontons. For those of you participating in this class today, at the very end of it, I'm going to ask you guys to put your dumplings up to the screen, and we're going to decide who has the best dumplings. And whoever has the best dumplings will get will win a chef sampler kit from my website, Two Mommy Spices, and that includes amazing lemongrass paste, Vietnamese lemongrass chili oil, a kit of 3 of my Vietnamese spice blends, which you can do pho in an Instapot, Vietnamese sausage within a matter of minutes, and this amazing lemongrass blend that works on anything. Chicken, pork, fish, tofu, vegetables, it works for everything. It's one of my favorite seasoning blends. I've been using that for years, and I finally decided to bring it to market to sell. So you have a chance to, oh, also 3 packs of, or 3 bottles of artisanal Sun fish sauce. You guys don't know, my family has been making fish sauce ever since 1895, and ever since my adolescent years, my family and myself, we've been searching high and low for reputable quality fish sauce, and I was only able to encounter that maybe about a few years back. Red Boat being one of them, and then Sunfish being the other. I really love this stuff. It's really high quality. You can't get it anywhere else online. It's very special. That will be included as well, and that's a $57 value that you're able to win just for being awesome and making dumplings. That's if you win. So let's turn on that beast mode, if you will, right? In the name of Marshawn Lynch, Oakland native, and let's make some good dumplings today. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, before we dive into our ingredients and technique, I think it's a little bit important to kind of dive into wonton history. So if you notice in your class agenda and the digital content that I gave you, specifically the PDF, I'm spelling wonton in the Vietnamese way. And that wonton is spelled Hoanh, space, second word, Thanh, opposed to what we see in our local Chinatowns. Our local Chinatowns, they're spelled out with Wonton. They are essentially the same thing. Wontons spelled a little bit differently in Vietnam, but their origins and their roots are from China. I would say in about the mid 19th, 20th century, there was a huge flux of Chinese immigrants going into China, going into Vietnam. China being just the northern part or the northern side of North Vietnam, they trickled all the way down to North Vietnam, all the way down to South Vietnam. And along with them, they brought a lot of their delicious and amazing cuisine. Wontons being one of them, chicken pho being another, beef pho being another. Once again, with their origins in China. And like most recipes in the world, even though there's different origins, recipes slightly change, recipes change over time, especially if people refuge or immigrate to different places. They change because of access. Maybe back in China, there was more access to soy sauce. When you go further down south to Vietnam, there's less presence of soy sauce and there's more presence of fish sauce. So naturally, you would swap out one for the other. The differences aren't that dramatic, and that's probably about the only difference, with some additions of different aromatics. In this case, we're using ginger and scallion. Okay, but everything else is fairly, the origins of it are fairly simple. And the way you cook it is fairly the same. You can either poach, pan fry, or steam. Today we're gonna poach, AKA boil. But we're gonna serve it in a lemongrass chili paste. At least that's the way I'm gonna do it. You don't have to do that if you don't have the chili paste. I'll show you some alternatives on how to do so. And this is my favorite way to eat it. I swear, when you go to Chinatown or you go to like a Vietnamese deli or whatnot, and you order wontons, they'll give you 5, maybe 6 in a bowl, maybe, you know, decent size wontons in your wonton egg noodle soup, or even if your wonton soup. With this recipe, you're doing about 1 pound of shrimp, 1 pound of pork. You can, my fiance and I portioned it, and the way I'm going to show you, we were able to get about 60, 70 dumplings. And out of those 60, 70 dumplings, we ate about 20 or 30 each. So we're sitting there on our sofa at our dining table, with like mounds of like these dumplings. And that's my favorite thing to do. Dumplings are so, not just nostalgic, but they're comforting. And I hope that you guys will enjoy this recipe. Okay, let's go into our ingredients. Okay, and then we'll go into a procedure. But before we do so, I have this cool setup for you guys. So that way, the streaming content you have will be super smooth, and it'll be easier for you guys to follow along. So this camera right here is my talking camera. In this camera, I will be talking to you guys directly, answering any questions, any thoughts, Q&A, all that stuff. And remember, there's 3 cameras, and then the second camera, I'll spotlight that camera for you. You don't have to worry about switching back and forth. Is the prep table. And I think it's super important to have this angle, because at this angle, you're able to see how I'm mixing, how much stuff I'm putting in, what stuff looks like, how big my cuts are, how long I'm mixing for, opposed to just following my instructions verbally. And then the third is, we have the stove over here. So this way you can see how hard I'm boiling, what it looks like. And when I say the dumplings will float, you can see what it looks like when it floats, all that stuff. You know, and I forget to mention, and the other great thing is, like, if I forget to mention something, you'll be able to see it visually and ask questions and etc. if I'm moving too fast or too slow. Okay, so let's go into our ingredients. And I just want to double check that we all have the same stuff, okay? And as you could see, I took my recipe list, right, and I put it all in front of me, because at least my personality, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. I always forget to put stuff. I always leave out certain items in recipes if they're not in front of me. You know, so if you haven't done that, I encourage you to do that now. But have it all in front of you, so that way you don't forget. And then you can just use your recipe to kind of follow the procedure to make sure you don't miss out on anything. So I have 1 pound of ground pork. It's best to use high quality stuff. I am and try to get the leanest stuff, the leanest pork you can. If you're buying from Whole Foods, the basis, you know, their meat program and their standards are very high. So anything you get from Whole Foods is fairly good. If most of you are local, I'm pretty sure all of you are local. Berkeley Bowl is my favorite as well. So if you get any meat behind their counter, I would say 99.99% of the time, their meat is extremely reputable and delicious. So don't worry about that. Your shrimp should already be peeled and deveined. I asked you guys to either mince it or small dice, either or. If you want to use a food processor opposed to chopping up, you can do so, but just pulse it 2, maybe 3 times at the most, and at a max of 5 seconds. But I'm going to hand chop it, okay? We have half a teaspoon of organic sugar. I like to use organic sugar over white sugar, mainly because organic sugar is less sweet. I feel that white sugar has this like super extracted sweet, super sweet flavor that I don't like, because it is processed. So organic sugar if you can. Another great substitute for those who are sugar sensitive will be either palm sugar or any of the other sugar substitutes, if you will, that are low glycemic index. Okay, that's half a teaspoon. Here's half a teaspoon of kosher salt. If you don't have kosher salt, but you have table salt, like Morton salt, I would only do a quarter teaspoon. Kosher salt, the granules of salt are a lot bigger. So that way it would permeate into the dish a lot differently, the same way differently from small granules of salt like Morton salt. So you have Morton salt, that fine table salt. Once again, use a quarter teaspoon. If you're using kosher like me, I'll do that half a teaspoon. Okay, a pinch of black pepper. If you want an exact measurement for this, this is 1/8 of a teaspoon. Once again, 1/8 of a teaspoon. I have 1 teaspoon of cornstarch. This is going into the meat mix to help bind everything together. I'll explain what that is. 2 cloves of garlic that we're going to mince. And then I wanted to just do something different. And I'm going to add ginger. Okay, if you guys have ginger, great. If you don't worry about it. The recipe will be just as delicious. And I want to add some scallions today too. So I'm going to add some scallions to the mix. It's not in the recipe, but I'm feeling kind of, like, spritzy, and I want to, spruce up this dish a little bit. So I'm going to add scallions into the mix. Okay. And if you have a bunch, that'd be plenty for today in this class. Okay. Here's this Vietnamese lemongrass chili paste that I was telling you about. It's from Pantry by Nature. I'm going to do a close-up for you. And it's tiger satay. This is, once again, lemongrass chili paste. This stuff is delicious. It takes any dish and adds this beautiful, complex, not just heat, but umami sensation to your dish. And it takes it from 1 to 100, like just with the add of a teaspoon. Okay, and we have some light soy sauce. This is a very reputable Taiwanese soy sauce. If you don't have this brand, I mean, this is super hard to get. I'm just super chefy about it. Light Kikkoman soy sauce would be just as fine. Okay, if you don't have light Kikkoman, you have regular Kikkoman. Once again, I would cut that recipe in half. So opposed to a quarter teaspoon, I would just use 1/8 of a teaspoon if you have regular Kikkoman, because regular Kikkoman is a lot saltier. Okay, and I'll go over those things. If you guys are concerned about it, just make sure you ask a question and I'll round back to it. For any ingredients you don't have, here's some Korean sesame oil. I believe that's a very, very good brand that I use. And this is my very, very delicious sunfish sauce that I carry on my website at tumamispices.com. This is a very delicious, it's not funky, high quality fish sauce made with anchovy and sea salt. If you can, use a high quality fish sauce. How do you know if it's a high quality fish sauce? If you buy it from my website, it's always high quality. That's one sure way to know. The second thing is always look at the ingredient label. You don't want any anchovy extract or salt or sugar or any chemical fillers or numbers that you can't identify with. High quality stuff is always made with whole ingredients, meaning ingredients that you can identify, which is anchovy and sea salt. Okay. And then we have this Japanese rice vinegar. Okay, I'm just, once again, being super chefy. I want to use some high quality stuff. If you just have regular like Kikkoman rice vinegar, it's completely fine. Okay. Okay, now, and then your wonton wrappers. I have a recipe for the dough as well, so I'll go over how to make the dough quickly. But, I've just got some basic, we went to H Mart and just got some basic wonton wrappers. We got square and we got circle, and I'll show you guys how to roll each one, okay? Okay, so let's push all these items back, and let's start off with our shrimp and our ground pork, okay? I'm just gonna grab my cutting board. Oops. Oh, Ben asked, what is the rice vinegar replacing? The rice vinegar is just a condiment for, or a dressing, if you will, for the wontons after they've been cooked. So if you don't have rice vinegar, lemon juice is completely fine. But don't, rice vinegar isn't replacing anything. It's just, once again, a dressing or a condiment, if you will, for the wontons after the fact, after they've been cooked, okay? You're welcome, Ben. And I love questions. You know, Ben, I'm super happy with Ben's question. Please ask as many questions as you like. I love questions. I geek out on food. And I love to, you know, teach and inform and geek out on any questions you may have. Okay, so don't worry about it. I love questions. Okay, so as I stated before, the shrimp should be peeled and deveined. You could buy pre-deveined and shelled. It just makes your life a lot easier. If you don't feel like getting your hands dirty, you can just put this in a food processor, but you just gotta wash your food processor afterwards. I like working with my hands, so I'm just gonna chop this up real quick. And we're gonna small dice this. I know in the recipe said mince, but I think it probably makes more sense for me to call it small dice. So that way you get an understanding of what I'm talking about. And these shrimp are, I think they're like 20, 25s. And when you see those numbers at the store, 12, 16, 16, 20s, 20, 25s, what that means is, so these are 20, 25s, that means that there's 20 to 25 of these shrimp in a pound. That's all that's the only thing that means. So 1620 is 16 to 20 shrimp in a pound. And that lower that number range goes, the lower it is, the bigger the shrimp, okay? And you don't have to worry about getting big shrimp for this because we're gonna chop it up anyways, okay? So I just go through it and I just chop. If you see, it's about 1/8 of an inch, okay? You could cut them finer, smaller, or bigger. It doesn't matter as long as you cut them to a consistent size. And if you notice, I'm using this super cool technique called this eagle's claw. See, because it looks like an eagle's claw, right? And the reason why I'm doing that, because if I have my hands laid up like this, it's super easy to chop my fingers off, right? I don't want to do that, okay? So instead, I do this eagle's claw. It comes into this spider-like tarantula stance, if you will, or a claw. And I'm using my knuckle here to guide where my knife is going. Thus, it reassures me that I'm never going to cut my finger. Fingers crossed, right? And then secondary, if you see that I'm holding my knife, I'm giving it a super firm grip, you know? It's not loose on my hand, because if it's loose on my hand, I can't control where that blade goes. But I'm doing a super firm knife, right? But I'm not pressing super hard down. I'm just giving it enough pressure to cut. So let's just kind of cut it through. And you don't have to lay it out any specific way. I'm just lining up all the shrimp here, right? Because they don't need to be a specific size. As long as they're the same size, and just run my knife through quickly, okay? And then I'm just gonna run through it once, and I'm gonna run through it a second time. Make sure they're all the same shape, okay? One second. Okay. Hope everyone is still with me. Take your time. Do not rush. This is not a contest. Actually, it is a contest, but it's not on how fast you make it. It's about how pretty your dumplings will be, okay? So don't rush. Take your time. All right. I'm just chopping through it. Once again, for those of you who want to use a food processor because you feel like it's easier for you, in a food you process no more than 2 to 3 times, and don't let it go for more than 5 seconds total. You know, 3 pulses together should not be longer than 5 seconds. Okay. Pulsing means is, just to be sure, holding the button down. That's not pulsing. Pulsing is, that's pulsing. You press the button for like 1/4 of a second and then you release, okay? And I'm just gonna go through one more time the other way. So just to kind of talk, like if you guys don't, you know, if you're using the shrimp you have in your fridge and you don't have quite 1 pound, it's completely fine. I just find that I really love shrimp and the way it works in this dumpling. and having an equal amount of shrimp to pork makes this dumpling so amazing. But for that, if you don't have it, it's completely fine, and don't stress over it. Okay, I'm just washing my hands, rinsing my cutting board. You should do the same. Just a good habit to have, and we're going to be touching the pork, and I just want to make sure my hands are super, super clean. Okay, so now we have our shrimp and pork in here. We need to add our aromatics, and that's going to be our garlic, ginger, and then let's grab just maybe like 2 sprigs of scallions. Okay, maybe 3. Let's do 3. And when I say sprigs of scallion, call it 4. I'm talking about each individual thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's just set that aside. Easiest way to peel garlic: smash it. See that? Blade away from me. I'm not going to do it this way, because if you do it this way, that blade's going to cut. It's going to cut my hand. You always want your blade away from you. So smash the garlic, right? Smash the garlic, right? It's 2 cloves of garlic. We're just going to mince that up. Once again, mincing up means just to chop really, really small. Don't worry about the fancy terms, right? And then we're going to peel our garlic. There's a few ways to peel garlic. I think the safest way is to peel it with, just get a metal edge spoon like this one, and just grab it. See, and it just comes right off, right? Just put some pressure to it and it comes right off. You know what I like to do with these ginger skins, these ginger peels? Fun fact of the day. Back in the day, in ancient China, when they used to make tofu, before they started using chemicals, that's another class, they made tofu with ginger skin. Ginger skin has this special enzyme where when you put it into soy milk, it'll coagulate. It'll turn into like a cheese-like substance with soy milk. Of course, you guys know soy milk's made from soybean, et cetera, et cetera. So the enzyme in this skin is incredibly amazing. It's very aromatic. Some would say it's pungent. It has a beautiful spice. And when you're looking for the flavor of ginger, I find more than anything, it's in the skin. Now, once again, we have our peeled garlic, peeled ginger. I'm just going to thinly slice this ginger. Once again, I'm using the eagle's claw technique. I just cut them into thin slices, right? And when I have a bunch of thin slices, I'm just going to bunch them up together again, and then make those slices even thinner, right? And then I'm going to turn this 90 degrees so that way I could cut them up into small little dices, and then do it again. And I think for the ginger, it's fairly important to get it pretty small, because having big chunks of ginger can be unpleasant. I like ginger, but like I think for the most of the world, most of the people you'll be cooking for, a big chunk of ginger could be fairly unpleasant. And when I say small, I would compare this to maybe the same size as your cracked black peppercorn. If you're unsure of what that means, is you just bring your black cracked peppercorn and just use it for reference. I'd say that's close to the same size. And this is technique, it's called a mincing technique, but basically I just keep on piling up the ginger into the same location, and I just run my knife through it. And as I run my knife through it, it will spread out, and I'll just continually keep pushing it back to the same area so that it can run under my knife. Okay, so let's compare it again. So it's black peppercorn to the ginger, they're about the same size. And we're just gonna add this straight into using my knife into our meat mix. Can you see that? We'll do the same thing with the garlic. You know, if you add a little bit of salt to your garlic, it will help break down that garlic. So it'll be a lot easier for you to mince smaller. The same thing what we did to the ginger to the garlic. Run it back and forth. Garlic, unlike ginger, the longer you cook it, it depends on the recipe. But if you're cooking ginger, if you're cooking garlic, it'll turn pretty buttery. It'll turn fairly nice. So you don't have to worry about cutting it too small, but for the sake of consistency, I'm going to make sure it's about the same size as that ginger. Are you guys with me? Hope so. Let me know if you guys have any questions from here. Okay. I just cleared off my cutting board into the trash bin. And now we're gonna add some of these scallions. If you don't have scallions, it wasn't part of the recipe, completely fine. I'm gonna separate the greens from the whites. We're gonna use all of it, but I'm just gonna separate the greens from the whites just so it's easier to cut. Same technique, eagle's claw, slice it through. If you notice, I'm not pushing down super hard. You're not hearing me clink like that. I'm using the full length of my blade because that's how a knife is supposed to work, right? You know, just think of a chainsaw, even a slicer. The reason why they're super sharp is because the full length of their blade is being used. Okay? And remember, let's not worry about being fast. Let's make sure about being accurate. And I don't want you to cut your fingers because you're gonna need your fingers later to make your dumplings. Okay. See? That's the green part. And we just take that a little closer to the camera. Dump all of that in. And if I fail to, we're gonna save this for later. We're gonna use the whites to garnish, okay? But I'll just put that aside for now. Board away. So now, those are our aromatics. Okay, I'm gonna use a wooden spoon to stir. Let's add our, once again, this is half a teaspoon of kosher salt. That's a quarter teaspoon of Morton salt, because they're not the same. Sprinkle that in. This is half a teaspoon of organic sugar. Okay. This is, I call this a pinch in our recipe, but this could be 1/8 of a teaspoon of cracked ground black pepper. Okay. And I always pepper mills if you can, because with pepper mills, it's not like a fine powder, you know, and I'm not a big fan of like black pepper when it's like in powder form because it could be fairly potent, you know, like dusty opposed to like peppery. So that just goes right in. This is cornstarch. You can use tapioca starch, you can use potato starch, cornstarch. You can even use a little bit of AP flour, but I like cornstarch. And what this does is, unlike a Italian or French meatball, or they use breadcrumbs and eggs as a binding agent. A binding agent means it's something that helps the meatball stay together, so when you cook it, it doesn't explode. Okay. In this case, we're going to use cornstarch to help keep all the meat together, and we're going to mix the meat really, really well, so that way it kind of comes together like a dough. With those two techniques, this should be just as good, okay, if not better. A little bit of cornstarch, okay, and then now our seasoning. Let's do a quarter teaspoon of fish sauce. The spoon here is a half a teaspoon, so I'm just going to do half of that. That goes right in. And then let's do a quarter teaspoon of soy sauce. And then, oops, that's a fork. Okay. Oops, that's a little bit more than I wanted. And now we're gonna do a drop of sesame oil, okay? And when I'm adding sesame oil, because sesame oil could be pretty pungent, you know, I put my thumb right at the very tip of it, so that way I can control how much goes out. Okay, we're just gonna do a drop, maybe 2, okay? And that's all we need for our wonton seasoning, and then we mix. If you have a KitchenAid mixer, if you will, you can also use a KitchenAid mixer. But I would use, as they would call this, paddle attachment to mix that mixture on a low to medium speed for no more than 4 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes, okay? But I don't want to wash my KitchenAid machine, and I like to work with my hand, so I'm just going to mix it by hand with a spoon, which is completely fine, okay? And it's very important, as you can see, it's like I'm always grabbing the sides and then pushing it back to the middle. And you see these little granules or like threads of ground meat. We're going to mix it until all this turns into one mass, until it turns into like a dough, if you will, almost similarly to bread. And the only thing you need to do that is you just need to agitate. You need to mix it until that comes together. And as this mass turns into a ball, if you will, you will start to see all the ingredients will start to pull away from the sides, okay? So just keep mixing. And then after we mix this, we're just gonna put this back in the fridge, and I'll quickly show you guys how to make the wrapper dough. That's, if you feel adventurous enough, like maybe not today, maybe like in a week, next week, the new year, maybe during a holiday, cooking with your family, you can make the dough. The dough's not too hard to do, it's an extra step, you know? I'll show you how that works, okay? So you see those fine little threads of meat? That all went away. And now it's almost becoming smooth. So I'm just gonna mix it a little bit more. Okay. And then we're gonna refrigerate it. As you can see, it's starting to come together, okay? Okay. Ooh, smell that, that smells so good. All those aromatics, that fish sauce, the soy sauce, the sesame oil, the scallion, ginger, garlic, all so great. Okay, so we're just going to, let's put this back in the fridge. Now let's work on our dough, okay? Just know that you can do this with, if you don't eat meat and you're thinking about going plant-based or if you've gone plant-based, there are plant-based meat alternatives that you can use that looks just like meat, and that recipe works just as well for that as for this as it does for that. You can do chicken as well. You could even use this with ground fish or fish cake. Fish cake is already seasoned, but ground beef, ground pork, ground lamb, ground chicken. But I have to say this recipe works best with pork if you're okay with eating pork. Let's put this in the fridge. So that's why, and you should never guilt yourself. I know I don't, for buying pre-made wonton skins, because I think the effort, for me at least, the value and the effort of the wontons is the fact that they're so intricate to make, and you have to make a ton of them. So between 2 people, my fiance and I, we had about 30 pieces, and they're not that big, so eating 30 can go by fairly quick. Okay. So I have a small little bowl that's about half a cup of, you could use AP flour or cornstarch. I'm using AP flour just so I could dust it. And this is our folding session right now, okay guys? We have a little bit of water to seal it. And let's just get some of our skins out. Hold a few. Let's do some of the circular ones and let's do some of the square ones. And I'll show you guys a few different styles, okay? Now, I'd love to sit here and do 100 dumplings with you guys, but I think I'll probably do like a dozen, 6 of each style. And then you guys can continue the effort, and I would love to see what you guys make. Make sure you have a few ready to cook towards the end of the class because there's going to be a contest. Okay, let's go back and grab our meat filling. I'm just going to mix this one more time. It's very important to make sure everything's mixed really well. If you're not sure about the seasoning, what I would do is get a little frying pan. You know what? Why don't I just do it with you guys? This is standard. This is protocol. Anytime you make sausage, anytime you make any sort of dumpling filling with meat, always test it to make sure that it has enough salt. Okay? Always. No excuse around that. Okay. Okay, so let's switch over to that camera. I have my water on like a low medium heat, just so that we're ready to go. I don't know where my frying pan is, so I'm just gonna use a pot. Let's turn the heat on here. I'm just gonna pivot the camera just a minute. Okay. I'm just gonna preheat my pan. Add about half a tablespoon of oil in there. And don't worry about this too much. I'm just putting oil in a pan. I'm heating it up to pan fry the meat mix just to make sure that the meat mix has enough seasoning. Okay. So as that's going, I'm just gonna pivot back just so we're not staring at an empty stove with our dumpling demonstration. Okay. It's super important that your surface is completely dry. I'm just gonna wipe this over with, I'm using a sheet pan because I don't wanna dirty up my table, so everything is contained in this sheet pan. You get these sheet pan on Amazon for about anywhere from like $12 to $20. I think it's always worth it. So I'm just going to dust this ever so lightly all over the place to make sure that it's dry. And if it's wet, it'll show that it's wet, obviously, right? So probably the easier one is to use the round, pre-cut, pre-rolled wonton. Okay, and I'm going to use, once again, one of my favorite spoons. This is a half teaspoon, so that way it controls how much. And I believe this is a full teaspoon. And then I have a tablespoon as well, but I'll grab that later. But you see the difference in size of that, right? So this way, if I'm using this spoon right here, I'll always control, it's a better control of how much I'm putting into my dumpling. And filling your dumplings with meat, it's very easy to be overzealous, you know? So I need, you know, it's good to have a tool like this to control how much you put in. Okay? So with my half teaspoon, I'm just gonna do a small little dollop right in the middle. And even though it looks like a lot, no, even though it looks like, doesn't look like that much, once you wrap it, it'll look like a full dumpling. I'm just gonna wet half of my dumpling, right? North, south, I'm just wetting the left side of that. Then I'm gonna meet the other side. If you call this the west side, I'm meeting the east side with the west side, pinching it. And then I'm just gonna take my 2 fingers and then seal it. Seal the rest of it, okay? That one wet, one dried side. So now you have this half moon. You wanna take it another step from here. Well, actually, there. And then I'm gonna repeat the process so that way you could see it. Okay. Just hold that thought. We have our oil ready to go. It's shimmering. I'll take it off, let it cool off just a little bit. I'm gonna cook this for 30 seconds. Just until that meat is cooked, so that way I can see what it tastes like cooked. Make sure that it has enough seasoning. I mean, I've done this recipe quite a few times. I know the seasoning's on point. It's the exact seasoning that I want. Okay. Just cook it, let it go. I only put a little bit in there so that way it can cook fairly fast. I'm gonna taste the shrimp. It's ready to go. Oh, that's so good. That is so good. Oh my God. I like Kevin Hart. Mm. Oh my God, it tastes so good. Okay. Let's turn that off. And now we are back to our dumpling demonstration. Okay, so we just did the half moon. Okay, and now we're gonna take the next step of this dumpling, which is taking the half moon and then rolling it into this like beautiful round dumpling thing. Okay, let me switch out this one for the other one. That one had a hole. Let's get rid of this one. Any wrappers that have a hole, just get rid of it because when you cook it, they're gonna explode. Okay. Same thing here. I'm gonna make sure I get a little bit of shrimp, a little bit of meat. Put the filling right dead center. And let's call this east, west, north, south. I'm just gonna run some water, just dipping my finger in the water, running a little bit of water from north to east, then east to south, stop in south, stop at north, right? Taking it, pinching it, pinching it, pinching it tight so that way it seals, pinching it tight, that way it seals, and then just dabbing a little bit of water. So I have my half moon now, right? Dabbing a little bit of water right in that corner here, and then just gently bending it to make that little beautiful shape. Isn't that pretty? Yep, and last time I made 60 of these. You know, and this is a great activity, especially for those of you who have families or friends, especially during the holidays. Just getting a bunch of wonton wrappers and then having a bunch of filling, and then everyone making their own, everyone chipping in to make wontons. I did it as a kid. I had so much fun doing it. Okay, so let's do some squares as well. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing, the same amount of filling. Make sure there's a little bit of shrimp in there. I'm just gonna set it right in the middle. Okay. So now let's do a diamond shape. There's north, south, east, west. I'm sorry, north, south, west, east. Jesus. Okay. I'm just gonna wet the northern part of this from east to west, taking the south, pinching it to the north, and sealing it. Okay. You can do whatever shapes you want. Just make sure whatever you do, try to keep all the shapes the same, if you will, because the shapes cook at different times. So here's a triangle one. And then this next demonstration, I'm going to do the evolution of this, or the next step of this is where we pinch it, wet the two corners, pinch it, and then make a nice little diamond shape out of it. Okay. Same thing. Taking my spoon, shimming it right in the middle. So from west to north, from north to east with water. North to south, pinch it, pinch it, pinch it. So if you're doing this and your wonton breaks, that means you're putting too much filling. So back off on the filling, if you will. You know, and I try to do it in increments of like 25 to 30% less. See, and now I wet that corner, and I just take the two corners, the two sides, and then I push them together so the two corners can meet. Isn't that pretty? That is so pretty. Oh my God. I like to dip it in a little bit of flour so it doesn't stick. So now we have, if you could see, our 4 different types of wonton folds. And let's just stick to 4 because those are the basics. Everything else will be super advanced. This is an introductory course. We could revisit that, of course. My favorite shape are these round ones. So I'm gonna do a bunch of these. Okay. See, and I'm just gonna go in turbo mode now. And hopefully they'll give you guys some time as well to make some. Okay. Let's see how many I could do, how fast I could do these. Once again, make sure you have your water going because we're gonna cook these pretty soon. Okay. Wetting the half of it. Pinch and seal, make sure it's flat. All right. You don't want any air bubbles in this. Just dusting a little bit of flour in there. And the cool thing about this is, like, of course, when you cook it fresh, it's amazing, but like the fact that sometimes it's pretty time consuming to make these. What I've done in the past, what my mom used to do, is that we will fill up this whole tray with wontons, different shapes and whatnot. We would freeze this tray. The following morning, all these wontons are frozen. We would tap it so the frozen wontons can break free from the tray, and then we take all those frozen wontons and then put them into a Ziploc bag. So that way we just can save more space in our freezer, right? Are you guys having fun? Is everyone doing okay? Seems like you guys are doing good. I hope you guys are doing good. Everyone's quiet. I hope that's a good thing. That means everyone's really focused. Okay, I'm just gonna do one more round one, and then I'm gonna do more of the diamond ones. Okay. And even the meat mixture, this meat mixture can freeze really well. You know, if you don't go through all the meat mixture, you make more than you anticipated. Just put this in a Ziploc, squeeze all the air out, make sure it's flat, and then put it in the freezer. And then if you thaw it, the way I would thaw the meat mixture is don't put it under running water. Please don't do that. That's not the best way to thaw. You know, do some planning and pull the frozen meat mixture out. Pull the frozen meat mixture out like a day or 2 ahead of time so it can thaw in your refrigerator, not your freezer. You know, when you put things under running water, there's a potential to like cross-contaminate everywhere, like the raw meat and the fact that it's running underwater, it gets all over the place in your sink. I'm not a big fan of that. Not that it's wrong, I just don't like that. I just rather pre-plan ahead opposed to rush things. Okay, so now we have 6 of these round little dumplings. Let's do another 5 of these diamond ones, okay? Same thing. And as you can see, I don't need that much water. I'm just using my finger. The moisture from my finger onto the wonton skin should be enough to seal it. You know, some people use egg white. You know, I think water works just fine. You don't have to use egg. Okay. See that? Dip a little bit of flour on the bottom side. If you notice, I've been dipping the wontons in a little bit of flour on the bottom side because this has a filling in it. That filling has moisture. And because of gravity, that moisture is going to go towards the bottom and it can potentially sog up your wonton skin. So I just dust the bottom of the wonton with just a little bit of flour for insurance so it doesn't stick, okay? Just a little bit of filling. And if you follow this recipe exactly, it should be perfect every time. Another reason why the bottom of your wonton skins get soggy is because sometimes certain recipes, if you will, excuse me, the meat mixture is really wet. And as you could tell, this meat mixture is fairly dry. There's no juice running at the bottom. And that's what you want for a wonton filling. Okay. See, this super tiny spoon is making it super easy for me. I highly recommend you guys getting a smaller spoon if you can, or even like a baby spoon, or even a demi-tasse, you know, the espresso spoons. You find them on Amazon for a few bucks. Just makes your life so much easier. When you get the right tools for your recipes, when you get the right cooking tools for your recipes, it makes it a lot easier. It will just encourage you to cook at home more. You know, there's nothing more discouraging than the fact of not having the right tools, and it makes these menial tasks, if you will, super laborious and difficult. So I always recommend, you know, just as a surgeon or even a mechanic, to invest in the right tools, because it'll make your life so much easier. Okay. So now I did 5, I'm just gonna do 1 more, okay? There's a little bit too much flour, just dust it off with your hand. All right, take my meat mixture, just place it right in the middle. All right, so that water, you should make sure that water's on a roaring boil now. I'm gonna make sure I do that too. Okay, make sure that pot of water is at a roaring boil. Turn it up, because we are about to cook our wontons any second now. Let's dip the bottom of that with a little bit of flour. Okay. Let's set this aside. Cool. Awesome. So these are our wontons. I'm just going to transfer these trays over to my stove. This mixture I'm going to put back in the fridge, and I'm just going to pack it up later and do a bunch of more wontons later. I just want to make sure you guys get the motion of everything without spending like a few hours making 100 wontons, if you will, you know. Washing my hands, make sure I wash my hands with soap and water. My water is boiling. Okay. And before we go into the process of cooking wontons, I want you guys to make sure that you have the following nearby. You can use a food colander, or you could use this handheld strainer basket. I'm going to use this handheld strainer basket. I have this small mixing bowl, and I'm going to have an additional mixing bowl just in case, okay? So I'm going to boil my wontons. I'll use this to scoop it out. We're going to dump it into this bowl, just so you guys know where I'm going with that. Okay. Switch the cameras. You know, just in case, if you guys want to see a close-up shot. See, and I have my triangle ones. Isn't that cool? So my water's boiling now. And I don't want to overcrowd the pot. I have a smaller pot that will fit my 12 just fine, but I want to go more than that. When I say crowded, that means they should still be able to float around. If you're putting so many wontons in there that it's not floating around, you're putting way too many wontons. Number 1. Number 2, the water should be roaring, boiling. Okay? I'm just going to put in one by one. Okay. Actually, I'm just going to do the first 6 because that's one shape. And I'm going to do the second 6. Okay? And we're just going to cook this. There should be enough water so the wontons could at least float to the top. And this is going to take maybe about, I'll say anywhere from like 3, maybe 4 minutes. If you're going to steam it, you set yourself up with a steamer, and that would take about 8 minutes. So we're boiling today, okay? Because boiling is a really nice way to do it. Let me readjust the camera so you guys can see right above it. There you go. That's a better angle. So you see they're starting to float to the top. And they shouldn't be sticking to the bottom. If they're sticking to the bottom, that means you don't have enough water in there. Okay? I'll let that go for about another 30 seconds. They're just popping up. And remember, because in each dumpling, even though they look fairly big, there's not a lot of meat in there, right? They just look a lot bigger than they actually are. So it cooks really, really fast. That's about 3 minutes right there. So let's just start scooping them out. I'm just going to use a spoon to help me shimmy the wontons into the basket as such. Okay. My first three, just shake all the water out, pour it into my bowl. Get the next two. Okay. Leave that up on there. So now, let's cook the second 6, a different shape. Throw that in there. See, if you notice, my water is on a high. My flame is on a high. My heat's on a high. The water is continually boiling, and it should continue boiling. It should never stop boiling. If it stopped boiling, when you take your wontons up, you need to reheat your water until it boils. Bring it back up to boil, then add your wontons in. Okay? They shouldn't be sticking together. If your water is really hot, they don't stick together. They'll just kind of float around as such. Let that go for about another 2-3 minutes. I'm going to quickly switch back to the prep table. So once you have your wontons in a bowl, you pull them out of the water, they will immediately start to stick. Like they'll get sticky because they're out of the water. You can use sesame oil, you can use avocado oil. I would use a neutral. I would stay away from olive oil if you will. But use a neutral oil like avocado oil, rice flour oil, sesame oil, something like that. Just add a few drops in there and kind of swirl it around. And by doing that, the wontons won't stick together. Sort of the same concept when boiling pasta. You just add a few drops of oil so they don't stick. Okay. So now let's switch back to the other wontons. That's about minutes right there. I'm going to grab, they're absolutely floating. Turning off the heat. I'm just going to grab a few out at a time. Okay. These are beautiful. I'm just going to put it in the same bowl as the other wontons. I don't mind mixing them up. And then because this bowl already has a little bit of oil in there, I'm just going to toss it around again for these new wontons coated with sesame oil. If you notice, I did a good seal in them. There were no air pockets. You see that? Just sealed up pretty nice. They kept their whole shape. Hi, John. We do not add salt in the water. There's no need to, but you can if you want. It's just different chefs, different cooks, different recipes. People compensate for salt in different ways. I feel like there's a good amount of salt in the dumplings already. And then there's going to be salt from the soy sauce that we're going to add in the dressing afterwards, so it doesn't need it. Other people oppose to poaching this in that water, that pot of boiling water, if you will. Other people poach it in chicken broth. So if you're poaching in chicken broth, you have to modify this recipe slightly because you're going to take salt from that chicken broth. And it's going to infuse into the dumpling, potentially making it more saltier. And everyone has different salt level tolerances, but for this recipe and what it should be, and the salt level that I'm immune to, considering this is like a Vietnamese recipe, if you will, the salt for the water, but that's a great question, John. Okay. And M. Rosen says, or asks, they're done when they float. Yeah, let them float and let them sit for another 30 seconds the moment you see them float. And that's a guaranteed way to know that they're done. Okay. Let's toss this around. Because once again, there's a little bit of olive oil in here. I mean, there's a little bit of sesame oil, so I just want to make sure all that is coated. Okay. So now, let's make our dressing, our yum yum dressing. So our scallion bottoms, I'm just going to shave up some scallion bottoms. We're going to add some, rice vinegar, some satay, some lemon juice. I'm going to add some light soy as well too. And you can use any sort of mixture or combination of these in terms of your dressing. You can even use sriracha if you will. Some people like hoisin. I'm not a big fan of the sweetness. Okay. That's the selection I'm going to go with. I'm going to use these scallion bottoms to start it off with. I'm just going to slice really fast. I have a bowl ready for these scallion bottoms to go into. Here's a nice bowl to put them into. Take my cutting board away. Don't need it anymore. And let's do a quick squeeze of lemon juice. And the reason why I'm adding the lemon juice, you can either do a lemon juice or rice vinegar next, is because scallions are raw. It's a raw onion, if you will. And I don't like that raw onion taste, so I'm just going to introduce it to a little bit of acid. Okay. A little bit of acid so it could cook that onion. This is a lemon. Lemon acid is sweeter than lime juice, but it has a nice bright punch to it. And I'm going to add a little rice vinegar because rice vinegar is like, it makes it just a little bit sweeter. Okay. So just a dash of rice vinegar. If you want to know an exact measurement for the lemon juice, that was about 1 teaspoon. Rice vinegar is about half a teaspoon. You can play with those ratios. I'm going to add a little bit of this light soy sauce. About 2 tablespoons, if you will. I mean, 2 teaspoons, not tablespoons. Mix that around. And this amazing Pantry by Nature Tiger Satay. This is, once again, a very savory umami. Umami means, things that taste very savory and that has a lot of meat, a meat taste to it, if you will. It's amazing tiger satay that's made with lemongrass. It's basically a lemongrass chili paste. You can find this on twomomiespices.com. Oh, it smells so good. I love lemongrass. I'm going to add half a teaspoon of that in there. You can choose to add sesame oil in this if you want to. You should be fine without it. Let's taste this. Use a different spoon. I don't want to double dip, Oh my God, that's so good. Oh, yum. Okay, so let's start assembling our dish now. I think you're gonna love this. I hope that you're gonna love this. So there's 2 ways you could do it. You could throw your wontons in here, dress it up really, really good, so that it sucks up all that juice, or you could place them in here and spoon it over. You do either or. I like to change it up. So I'm just gonna use a chopstick. Grab a few different shapes. The thing about these wontons is once you boil them, you need to eat them within, you need to eat them fairly quickly, because if they sit out, they won't taste as good, right? Just like noodles, you boil noodles and you let them sit out, they won't taste as good. Okay, I'm just gonna add a few. Like I said, personally, myself, my fiance, we could eat like 20 of these easily. How many is on this plate? This is 3, 4. This is 8. I'm just gonna spread them out so that way when I spoon the sauce over, it could really soak up the sauce. Okay. Now let me make sure that that camera's a little bit clearer. There you go. Just spoon this beautiful, spicy lemongrass sauce all over our wontons. Oh my God, doesn't that look good? These scallions, I love them when they're not raw. There you guys go. Oh my God, I hope you get that lemongrass chili satay because it continually changes my life. And that's not an understatement at all, okay? Voila. Hope you guys enjoy it. And I hope to do this again with you guys soon. If you guys have any questions, please email me once again along with your photos. You get your products on tumamispices.com. And if you guys would tag me on Instagram as well, that's at Chef2DavidField, and I'll type it in right now. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy your wontons. I know Super Bowl season's coming up. For me, chicken wings and wontons are synonymous with Super Bowl. Trust me. Trust me, okay? Awesome. Thank you guys. You guys have a great one.